They didn't even wait for the lawyer to speak. She will get nothing. Dad hated her. That's what my sister Karen said the moment I stepped into the room. No greeting, no eye contact, just that sharp, cutting sentence, loud enough for everyone to hear, like she wanted it to echo. I felt the words land in my chest like a punch. My grip on my son Eli's hand tightened. His small fingers curled back around mine, warm and trembling. I forced a smile down at him, thin and shaky, but he knew. He always knew. I hadn't even taken a seat yet, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't family. I was just a loose end they were here to snip clean. Karen sat at the head of the table, perfectly poised in a gray pantsuit, her dark hair scraped into that tight bun she always wore when she wanted to feel superior. Her lipstick was sharp red, classic Karen, war paint for a battle I didn't know I'd walked into. Then came the voice I dreaded even more. My Uncle Rick, Dad's older brother, let out a dry laugh. He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, that smug smirk of his spreading like oil across his face. "Even her kid knows she's worthless," Rick muttered, nodding toward Eli like he wasn't even human. Eli lowered his eyes to the floor. My heart cracked a little deeper. Around the room, a few heads nodded. My cousins, old neighbors, family friends I hadn't seen in years, people who'd long since picked sides, and I wasn't on theirs. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. The air was stale with the smell of dust, leather chairs, and whatever overly sweet perfume Karen had bathed in. I could feel my pulse in my ears, loud, hot, humiliating. I led Eli to the farthest chair at the end of the long mahogany table, away from the pack. The chair creaked when I sat. Eli climbed up beside me, his legs swinging above the floor, his hands folded in his lap like he was trying to disappear. Karen turned her head slowly toward me, and when our eyes met, she smiled. But there was no warmth in it, just pity soaked in poison. "You know this is pointless, right?" my sister Karen said, voice smooth and cold. "Dad rewrote the will, cut you out completely, said you were dead to him." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My tongue sat heavy in my mouth, useless. I just nodded slightly, like I understood. But inside, why did I even come? I thought maybe there'd be something. A note, a line, a sign he remembered me. Something to make it all make sense. Instead, I was back in the one place I promised myself I'd never return to, surrounded by people who made it clear they had already buried me, long before they buried him. And just as I was about to stand, to leave before they started carving up the estate like vultures, the door creaked open. Mr. Connors, my father's lawyer, entered the room, clutching a thick folder beneath his arm. He looked exactly the same, neatly pressed, tired eyes, and a face that gave nothing away. The room fell silent. Everyone sat up a little straighter. This was it. I braced myself for humiliation. I came expecting nothing, and I'd leave with exactly that. Or so I thought. Because what no one in that room knew, not Karen, not Rick, not even me, was that my son Eli had brought something with him, and with one sentence, he would unravel everything they thought they knew. "You forgot the video he recorded." It had been 8 years since I stepped foot in a room like this with my family. 8 years since I packed up a life they said I didn't deserve, took Eli, just 2 at the time, and left without looking back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because every conversation with my father, Charles, ended in silence or shouting. Because every family gathering felt like walking barefoot across glass while smiling for the camera. But now, I was back in a room that still smelled like cigar smoke and old anger. The irony? I didn't even know I was invited to the will reading. The envelope showed up 3 days after the funeral. No note, just the date, time, and address in Connor's formal script. For a moment, I wondered if it was a mistake. Maybe they meant to send it to Karen, or maybe it was just a cruel final joke. But Eli wanted to go. He looked at me with those wide, soft eyes, his voice quiet but certain. "We should go, Mom," he said. "Maybe there's something you need to hear." I don't know how a 10-year-old can carry that kind of wisdom, but he does. Sometimes I think he sees the world in ways most adults never learn to. So we came. I wore the plain black dress I hadn't touched since my mother's funeral, and he wore a little button-up that he picked himself. I braided his hair that morning with trembling hands, and he told me I looked beautiful. He didn't know I had barely slept, that I was terrified to face the people who'd treated me like a ghost for nearly a decade. I knew what they thought of me. Karen, the perfect daughter. She stayed. She helped. She took care of Dad. She made sure everyone saw her doing it, too. She told the story so many times it became gospel. Julia abandoned the family. Julia couldn't handle real life. Julia ran away. They never asked why I left. They didn't know, or didn't care, that Dad stopped speaking to me after I refused to stay in a marriage that was tearing me apart. That when I showed up on his porch with Eli in a suitcase, he shut the door without saying a word. That the one person who was supposed to protect me from the world had become another wall I had to break through. Uncle Rick didn't help. He was Dad's echo, always repeating the same bitter phrases. Family doesn't quit. Blood is loyalty. Don't come back crying. And Karen, she soaked it all up and turned it into a script she could weaponize. So I stopped trying. I built a quiet life for Eli and me. We didn't have much, but we had peace, and love, and laughter. Still, part of me held on to the smallest, most fragile hope that maybe, in the end, Dad had seen something, regretted something, left something behind. Maybe that's why I opened the envelope, why I showed up. But now, sitting in that room surrounded by hard eyes and smug smiles, I felt foolish for hoping. Eli hadn't said a word since we sat down. He sat straight, hands in his lap, eyes scanning the room like he was studying each face. His calm unnerved me a little, like he was waiting for something. And then Mr. Connors cleared his throat and opened the folder. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, "Just get through this. Don't let them see you break." But Eli? He was sitting on something bigger than grief, and before this was over, he'd prove he was the only one in the room truly listening to my father. Mr. Connors cleared his throat again, the way lawyers do when they want the room's attention without actually asking for it. He adjusted his glasses, flipped open the folder, and began reading the will like it was just another Tuesday. I barely heard the first few lines. Generic legal stuff, estate definitions, executor declarations. My mind was spinning, not with what he was saying, but with what I knew was coming. He wouldn't say my name. I was sure of it. Still, every time he paused to turn a page, I held my breath like maybe, just maybe, the next words would be different. Maybe he'd surprise me. But no. It was all the usual suspects. To my daughter, Karen, I leave the primary residence and all its contents. Karen's face didn't move, but I could feel her satisfaction like perfume wafting across the table. She glanced sideways at her husband, Neil, who gave her a smug little nod like they were already planning renovations. To my brother, Rick, the lake property and all remaining shares in the family business. Rick leaned back further in his chair, arms folded, chin high like a king, surveying his newly acquired kingdom. I watched him slide the cigar back between his teeth and bite down gently, like he'd already won something. To Paul, my nephew, the vintage car collection. Paul? The cousin who once locked me out of my own room at age 9 just to watch me cry? That Paul? I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my face from cracking. I could feel the tears gathering behind my eyes, hot and sharp, but I didn't let them fall. Still no mention of me, not even a footnote. Then came the line I'd been dreading. And as previously declared, my daughter Julia will not receive a portion of this estate. There it was. Simple. Final. Like a closing door. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Eli's fingers slipped into mine under the table. I hadn't even realized my hands were clenched in my lap. His touch brought me back, anchored me before I drifted too far. I could feel my heartbeat behind my eyes. My skin burned. And then came the whispers, low but intentional. Karen let out the softest scoff. "Told you," she muttered to Neil. Uncle Rick shook his head like it was all so predictable. "Takes a certain kind of person to walk away from her own father," he said louder than he needed to. The others, the cousins, the so-called family friends, didn't say much, but their silence was just as loud. I stared down at the wood grain on the table. The lines twisted and spiraled, almost hypnotic. It was easier to look at that than their faces. I could hear my own voice inside my head, flat and hollow. Why did I come? Why did I think he'd remember me? But then, Eli moved. He let go of my hand and sat up straighter. I felt the shift before I saw it. His voice cut through the tension like a tiny blade, soft but unshakable. "You forgot the video he recorded." The room froze. Karen blinked. Rick turned. Mr. Connors paused, pen still hovering over the page. I turned to Eli, confusion flooding my brain. "What video?" I asked, barely above a whisper. But Eli wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, steady, certain. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small white envelope slightly crumpled but sealed tight. My name was on the front, but underneath it was Dad's handwriting. For the lawyer, only if it gets ugly. I didn't understand it yet, but Eli did. And suddenly, for the first time all day, I felt the balance in the room shift. I stared at the envelope in my son Eli's hands like it was radioactive. He held it so calmly, like it wasn't the most dangerous object in the room. But my eyes were locked on the handwriting across the front. Sharp, all caps, unmistakable. My father's, for the lawyer, only if it gets ugly. Well, it had gotten ugly. I could barely find my voice. "Eli, where did you get that?" He looked up at me, his expression soft but steady. "Grandpa gave it to me a while ago. He told me to keep it safe." My heart stuttered. He gave it to you?" He nodded. "The day we visited him, just me and him, you were at work." I blinked hard, trying to pull memory into focus. I remembered that day. Eli had asked if he could go with my neighbor to drop off something at Dad's. It was the first time I'd let him go without me. I had no idea they even spoke. Now Mr. Connors reached across the table. "May I?" he asked gently, and Eli handed the envelope over without hesitation. The entire room leaned in. Karen was squinting like she couldn't make sense of it. Rick shifted in his seat, no longer slouched. For once, nobody had anything to say. The envelope made a quiet tearing sound as Connors opened it. Inside was a USB drive, small, black, ordinary. But my pulse kicked like it was a grenade. Connors furrowed his brow and pulled a note from the envelope, too. Another page in my father's handwriting. His eyes scanned it, and for the first time since he walked into the room, his composure cracked. Just slightly, but I saw it. He didn't speak right away. He just nodded slowly, like something unspoken had been confirmed. "Everyone," Connors said, his voice quieter now. "There is a video message from Charles Thomas, recorded before the final version of this will. It was sealed with instructions to be played only if this situation became contentious." His eyes flicked to Karen, then Rick. They both shifted in their chairs. Karen scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He didn't say anything about a video." Uncle Rick leaned forward, voice harder now. "We don't know what's even on that thing. Could be fake." Connors raised a hand. "It's time-stamped, authenticated. I recognize the handwriting and signature, and per his instructions, I'm legally bound to play it." He plugged the USB into a sleek black laptop sitting on the desk beside him. The screen flickered to life, the logo dissolving into a black frame with a single word: play. The air in the room changed. No one spoke, no one moved. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. I gripped the arms of my chair like they might keep me from floating off into some other world. My breathing was shallow, shaky. Why would Dad leave a video? Why to Eli? What could he possibly want to say now after everything? Eli didn't look nervous. He just sat still, eyes on the screen like he already knew what was coming. Karen looked pale now. Her lips were pressed into a tight line. Rick had stopped chewing his cigar. I wanted to run. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I wanted to know. Connors hit the spacebar. The screen went black for half a second, then flickered, and suddenly there he was, my father, older, thinner, sitting at his desk, wearing that navy sweater I bought him for his last birthday, the one I didn't know he'd ever worn. His hands were folded, his expression not cold, just tired. He looked straight into the camera, and then he started to speak. I didn't breathe. Not when the screen lit up. Not when I saw his face. Not when I heard the first two words leave his mouth. "Hi, Julia." He looked older than I remembered. His skin had thinned. His once proud posture had softened. But it was still my father, Charles Thomas, sitting at that worn oak desk with the antique globe behind him, just like when we were kids. Only this time, his expression wasn't stern or distant. It was human. "If you're watching this," he continued, "I'm gone, and I'm guessing things didn't go well at the reading." His hands were clasped in front of him, fingers twitching slightly. A small, nervous habit I had, too. "I didn't expect peace between you and the family. I know what they think of you. Hell, I know what I said about you." He looked down, swallowed. And I was wrong. My breath caught in my throat. My nails dug into the armrest of my chair. Eli glanced up at me, but I couldn't look away. I believed what Karen told me. I believed Rick. I believed that you left because you didn't care. I didn't ask questions. I didn't listen to you, not once. You tried, and I shut the door in your face, on you and Eli. I heard Karen shift in her chair, sharp and uncomfortable. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Dad's voice cracked, just barely. "I thought being strong meant being proud, that if you walked away it was betrayal. But strength is showing up. It's protecting your child, and you did that. You did what I couldn't." His eyes glistened. My own vision blurred. I met Eli one day when he stopped by. Just the two of us. That kid, he didn't say much. But when I asked him about you, he just said, "My mom is the safest place in the world." My hand flew to my mouth. "I lost you, Julia. I see that now. I lost my daughter because I couldn't stop being right long enough to love you the way you needed. But I won't let my last act be pushing you away again." He cleared his throat and looked straight into the camera, steady. So I changed the will. There was a collective gasp in the room. Someone's chair creaked. Rick's, maybe. Karen muttered something under her breath, but I couldn't hear it. I could barely hear anything but the sound of my father's voice. "I've left the house to you and Eli. The savings, the retirement fund, it's yours, and a college trust for Eli. I know it doesn't fix what I broke, but I want you to have the peace I couldn't give you when I was alive." He paused, then leaned slightly closer to the camera. "And if they're angry, let them be angry. You earned this. You lived through all of it and never stopped being a mother. That's more than I ever managed." A lump formed in my throat so big I could barely breathe. "I'm proud of you. And I love you, Julia. Always did. I just didn't know how to show it." And then, just before the video faded to black, he added quietly, "Take care of my grandson. Tell him, thank you." The screen went dark. No music, no transition, just silence. Pure, still, holy silence. Around me, chairs squeaked, someone sniffed, but I didn't move. I sat there, hand over my mouth, tears slipping down my cheeks, feeling like something I didn't even know I was carrying had finally been lifted after all the years of noise, of blame, of exile, of silence. He heard me. He finally heard me. And in the quiet that followed, no one could take that away. No one spoke when the screen went black. Not Karen, not Rick, not the cousins or the family friends who once smiled politely while ignoring the weight I carried. Even Mr. Connors sat still, his hand frozen above the mouse, as if stopping the video had also stopped time. And maybe, in a way, it had. I don't know how long I sat there. My hand was still over my mouth. My cheeks were wet. But I hadn't noticed the tears falling until I felt Eli's hand slip into mine again. He wasn't crying. He just looked up at me with this small, knowing smile, like he'd been waiting the whole time for the truth to finally find a voice. I leaned down and kissed the top of his head. My heart ached with something too big for words. Love, relief, grief, all knotted together. Across the room, Karen stood abruptly. Her chair screeched against the floor. She picked up her bag with shaking hands and walked out without a word. Her husband trailed behind, red in the face, mumbling something under his breath. Rick stayed seated longer, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on nothing. When he finally stood, he looked at Connors like he wanted to argue. But even he knew there was nothing to fight. My father had spoken. His truth was now unignorable. The others followed, one by one. Some couldn't meet my eyes. A few offered quiet nods. Pity or maybe respect. I couldn't tell. Soon, it was just the three of us left. Connors gently closed the folder and cleared his throat. "There will be some paperwork," he said, voice softer than before. "But everything's in order." I nodded. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? He gave a small smile, genuine, and left us alone in the room. The silence that followed wasn't the same kind I had grown used to. This silence was peaceful, whole, like something had finally settled into place. I looked at Eli, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was the strongest person in the world, and maybe, in his eyes, I was. But he was the one who saved me, who carried that envelope like it was just a piece of paper, not the truth that would rewrite everything. We stayed a little longer. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed time to breathe. Maybe I wanted to sit in the one room where, for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. I kept hearing Dad's voice in my head. "I'm proud of you." 3 words I thought I'd never hear, words I needed more than I ever admitted. I thought about everything I'd carried, years of silence, of being blamed, of being erased, and now I wasn't erased. I was seen, heard, remembered. I looked at Eli again. "Thank you," I whispered. He tilted his head. "For what?" "For being braver than me," I said, "for holding on to something that mattered." He smiled. "I just wanted you to hear him." And I had. Not just in the video, but in the shift that came after, in the peace that filled the room once everyone else had left. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always come when you want it, but when it does, it changes everything. So, no, I didn't walk out of that room broken. I walked out holding my son's hand with my father's words still echoing in my chest. I walked out whole. And that silence finally meant something. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been pushed aside, misjudged, or made to feel like your voice didn't matter, just know this: you are not invisible. And sometimes the truth takes time, but it will come to light. If you felt something while listening, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Stories like this only reach the people who need them most when you help them travel. And if you want more real, raw, and emotional stories just like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to tell. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, your voice matters. I got the text on a Wednesday afternoon. "Dinner at Delvino's, 7 p.m. We have big news." It was from my mom, sent to the family group chat that I'm usually the last to hear from. No context, no extra messages, just that. But what caught me wasn't the place or the time. It was the tone. That word, big, felt intentional. Like they wanted me to be curious. Like they wanted me there. And I went. Because no matter how distant things have felt lately, they're still my family, right? I remember pulling into the parking lot that night. The sun was just starting to dip, casting these long shadows across the pavement. I took a breath before stepping out of the car, adjusting the collar of my nurse's uniform. I hadn't had time to change. My shift had ended late, and I'd rushed over without even grabbing dinner. But part of me was excited. Maybe things were finally changing. Maybe this time I'd be part of something. As I walked into the restaurant, I could already hear the laughter. I turned the corner into the private dining room and froze. There they all were. My mom, Marlene, sipping wine and smiling like she was posing for a magazine cover. My dad, Gerald, arms crossed, nodding politely as he listened to Tessa. And Tessa, my younger sister, was glowing. Her hair freshly styled, makeup flawless, surrounded by everyone's attention as always. Even my grandfather Walter was there, sitting at the end of the table, quiet as usual but present. They were all there, except me. No one had saved me a seat, but that wasn't the first thing I noticed. My eyes landed on the oversized white banner stretched across the back wall. "Congratulations to our real daughter." Big, bold letters, glittery, loud. It hit me like a slap. I stood there trying to make sense of it. No one looked shocked to see me. No one apologized. My mom raised her glass casually and said, "Oh, good, you made it. We've already started." Tessa looked me up and down and smirked. Didn't have time to change? I nodded stiffly and forced a smile. Got off work late. There was a weird kind of silence after that. Not awkward, comfortable, for them. Like I was the guest, not the daughter. Like this wasn't for me at all. A waiter came by and slid a spare chair to the edge of the table for me. No one moved to make room. I sat there quietly, trying to shrink myself small enough to disappear. That's when my mother lifted her glass again. To Tessa, she said with a proud, dramatic smile, "Our real daughter. We finally have something to celebrate." Everyone clinked their glasses, except me. I stared down at the tablecloth, unsure if I'd misheard. Real daughter? Tessa laughed. Okay, I'll explain, she said like she was telling a joke. She leaned in with a gleam in her eye. I did one of those DNA kits. It turns out I'm not adopted. I'm actually your biological child. Mom and Dad thought they had me through surrogacy, but I'm theirs. Fully, completely theirs. People cheered like it was a gender reveal party. Gerald wiped away an emotional tear. My mom placed her hand over her heart. I blinked, trying to keep my voice steady. Wait, what does that mean about me? The table quieted for a second. Then Marlene gave the smallest shrug. Well, honey, you were part of the same process. It was complicated. We were young. Mistakes happen. Laughter rose again, louder this time. I sat there, suddenly cold in a room full of warmth I wasn't invited into. And just when I thought I couldn't feel smaller, the waiter came back. He walked over to me, not anyone else, and handed me a small sealed envelope. The owner asked me to give this to you, he said. Everyone at the table turned to look. I looked down at the envelope. My name was handwritten across the front, just my name. And in that moment, everything shifted. I wasn't born into this family, at least not in the way most people are, but growing up, no one ever said anything different. My parents, Marlene and Gerald, had always been distant, but they called me their daughter. They gave me their last name. I called them Mom and Dad. They fed me, clothed me, sent me to school. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class American family, but inside our house, it always felt like something was missing, something I could never name out loud. Tessa, my younger sister, was everything they ever wanted. From the moment she could walk, she was the center of every conversation, every holiday, every picture frame on the wall. She was their golden girl, blonde curls, pageant smile, straight A's with half the effort. And me? I was the one who remembered to take out the trash, the one who sat in the back seat during vacations so Tessa could have the window, the one who always made her own birthday cake because Mom ran out of time. I don't remember the last time either of them told me they were proud of me. Not when I got into nursing school. Not when I stayed up 36 hours during the COVID crisis. Not even when I paid off my student loans by working double shifts every weekend. But I didn't complain. I thought maybe that was just how families worked. Maybe love didn't always look like hugs or applause. Maybe being the responsible one meant you didn't get a spotlight. And despite all the little cracks, I stayed close. I called on birthdays. I offered rides to the airport. I showed up to Christmas with gifts even when no one thought to get me one. I never missed a dinner invite because deep down, I kept hoping this time would be different. That's why when the group text came in about the dinner at Delvino's, I told myself, maybe they're finally going to see me. Maybe the big news was about something we could all share. Maybe, just maybe, I'd finally be part of the celebration, not just a spectator. I was tired that day, physically and emotionally. 12 hours on the hospital floor, 2 codes called, 1 patient I couldn't save. But I didn't cancel. I didn't want to be the one who bailed. I'd gotten used to being the one who showed up, even when it hurt. I remember putting on a bit of lipstick in my car mirror, trying to pull myself together. I told myself, don't overthink it. Go in. Smile. Maybe this time will be different. But nothing could have prepared me for that moment, that banner, that sentence. Congrats to our REAL daughter. It wasn't just a party, it was a statement, a line drawn in glitter between who belonged and who didn't. And the way they looked at me when I asked, what does that mean about me? So I'm like I was the one making things uncomfortable, like I was overreacting to something they thought was a harmless joke. It told me everything I needed to know. Still, I didn't leave. Not right away. I stayed in that chair with my hands in my lap and my heart beating out of rhythm. I waited for someone, anyone, to notice the pain on my face, to ask if I was okay. No one did. And then The envelope came. The waiter placed it down gently, respectfully, like it was something sacred. The outside was simple, just my name in black ink, Alina. I hadn't seen my name written like that in years, not in handwriting, not like it mattered, and that's when I knew. This wasn't part of their plan. This wasn't something they arranged. This was something different. Someone had known I'd need this moment, that I'd need the truth, and somehow they'd made sure it found me. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I didn't know it yet, but what was inside that envelope was going to flip everything I thought I knew upside down. Not just about that dinner, about my entire life. I didn't open the envelope right away. I held it in my hands like it was something fragile, something that could either save me or destroy me. The paper was thick, almost old-fashioned, and the handwriting was sharp and deliberate. Someone had taken their time. Someone had wanted this to reach me, and I didn't know if that terrified me or gave me hope, but I couldn't open it. Not there. Not while I was still surrounded by people who were pretending I didn't exist. I slipped it into my coat pocket and looked up. The conversation had moved on without me. Tessa was now talking about her DNA test like it was the climax of a rom-com. I honestly just did it for fun, she said, swirling her wine. But when I got the results, I was shocked. Apparently, I'm 100% biological. No donor, no mix-up, just me, the real deal. Everyone laughed again. Even Grandpa Walter gave a polite nod, though I noticed he wasn't laughing with his eyes. I finally found my voice and asked quietly, "So, what does that mean about me?" For a second, no one said anything. My dad looked toward the wall like he was trying to remember a dentist appointment. My mom shifted in her seat and gave this small, rehearsed smile. "Well," she said, "we used 2 embryos. Back then, the clinic didn't tell you much. We didn't ask too many questions." Tessa interrupted. "Basically, it was a mix-up. I'm theirs. Alina, you might be someone else's." She said it with a laugh, like she was saying I'd ordered the wrong Starbucks drink. Everyone chuckled along, except me. I wanted to leave. I wanted to scream. But I sat there completely still, like my body had detached from the room. My mom reached across the table to pour herself more water. "It doesn't really change anything, though," she added casually. "You're still family." Still family. The way someone says that when they're talking about an old neighbor or the dog they gave away years ago. I felt my throat tightening, my heart pounding in my chest, not fast, but heavy, like it was dragging the rest of me down. No one apologized. No one acknowledged that what they'd just revealed was more than a quirky surprise. It was my entire identity being thrown out like a punchline. I wasn't just the second-best daughter. I was the one who didn't even belong. That banner above the table made it clear. Our real daughter. Not both our daughters. Not our family. Just one. One real daughter. And I wasn't her. Tessa was glowing, eating up every second of it. She pulled out her phone and started showing pictures of the DNA results, like it was proof of her destiny. My parents leaned in, fascinated, amazed, hanging on to her every word. I sat there invisible, shrinking with every sip of my untouched water. At one point, Tessa leaned toward me and said, "Honestly, this kind of explains a lot. You've always been different." She didn't mean it kindly. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a reminder from work. "Overnight shift next week confirmed. Be there at 6 p.m. Even my job treated me with more respect than my own family." I swallowed the rising heat in my throat and stood up. "I'm going to step outside for some air," I said. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. My chair scraped softly against the floor, and their conversation continued without skipping a beat. I stepped into the cold night air, pulled the envelope from my coat, and stared at it under the street lamp. I was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the realization that I had never truly been part of that table. Not when I was 5, not when I was 15, not tonight. And somewhere inside that envelope, I had a feeling I was about to find out why. I stood outside that restaurant like the ground beneath me wasn't real anymore. The laughter from inside kept spilling through the window. Soft clinks of glasses, familiar voices, stories told for the 50th time. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was just another family gathering, just another ordinary dinner. but something had split wide open inside me, and all I could hear was the sound of paper unfolding in my hands. The envelope was warm now from how long I'd held it, my name, Alina, still staring back at me like it belonged to someone else. For a second, I thought about not reading it. Maybe it would be easier to walk away from it all and just carry the not knowing. But I'd spent most of my life doing exactly that, quietly swallowing things that didn't make sense, excusing the cold looks, pretending their love felt like enough. I was done pretending. So I tore open the seal. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The handwriting stopped me cold, slanted, elegant cursive, familiar in a way I couldn't place at first. Then it hit me. Grandpa Walter. I hadn't seen his handwriting since I was a child, back when he used to mail me birthday cards with $2 bills tucked inside. He'd stopped years ago. Or maybe someone had made him stop. I opened the letter. Alina. If you're reading this, it means they finally told you. Or maybe they told you just enough to hurt you, not enough to explain. I've waited years for this moment. There's something I've needed to say for a long time, but I was asked not to, and I kept that promise. Until now. I could barely breathe. You were never supposed to end up with them. Your mother, your real mother, was my daughter's best friend. Her name was Camilla Cardenas. She was strong, fierce, kind. She wanted you more than anything, but she died in a car accident when you were just a baby. No one talks about her anymore. They buried her memory to protect themselves. Not you. I felt my knees give. I sat down on the stone bench near the sidewalk. The letter trembled in my hands. Camilla. My mother had a name I'd never heard, a name they'd never once spoken. After the accident, Marlene stepped in. She offered to take you in. She said it was the only way to keep you safe and cared for. At the time, I believed her. She was my daughter. I wanted to trust her, but the truth is, she didn't take you out of love. She took you out of guilt and pride. She didn't want to raise her best friend's child. She wanted to erase her. I tried, Alina. I tried to keep you close. But Marlene didn't want me involved. She said I confused things. She said it was better for you if you just moved on. I remembered how my grandfather used to pull me aside at family gatherings and whisper things like, "You're stronger than they know," or "You see things clearly, just like your mother." I thought he meant Marlene. Now I knew he hadn't. I kept Camilla's things, letters, journals, photos. I have one of her holding you in the hospital, smiling so wide you'd think she was the luckiest woman alive. She was. You were her miracle. You still are. Come see me tonight. I'm still here. I'll tell you everything. Love, Grandpa Walter. The letter slipped from my fingers, landing softly in my lap like it had delivered its final weight. My chest felt like it was caving in and expanding all at once. Every part of me that had been waiting to be chosen, to be included, to be seen, suddenly felt irrelevant. I didn't want to be seen by them anymore. I didn't need to be. I looked up at the restaurant window. My family, the people I thought were mine, were still talking, still celebrating, still living in the center of their own story where I had never truly belonged. They hadn't lost anything tonight. But I had found something, a thread of truth, a name, a mother, a grandfather who had never given up on me, a family I had never been told about, one that might have actually loved me the way I'd always longed for. I stood up. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to my car, hands steady now. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't owe them that. They'd had 30 years to tell me the truth, and they chose silence. But someone else had chosen love, and he was waiting for me. The drive to Grandpa Walter's house felt longer than it was. It was only 15 minutes from the restaurant, but every red light stretched into an eternity. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. My thoughts raced faster than my heart. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the overwhelming pull of something I had never felt before. Truth. I didn't know what I'd find when I got there. I just knew I had to go. When I pulled into the driveway, his porch light was already on. He was sitting on the swing, exactly like he had when I was little. Back then, I'd climb onto the seat beside him and ask questions about everything. I'd thought of him as the only adult who really listened to me. Now I knew why. He stood up slowly when he saw me. No words at first. He just opened his arms, and I walked into them like I was coming home. He held me longer than I expected, longer than anyone had in years. When he pulled back, his eyes were glassy, but his voice was steady. "I'm so sorry you had to find out like that." I nodded, too choked up to answer. He led me inside, and everything smelled like cedarwood and old memories. The living room hadn't changed in decades. The same crocheted blankets, the same vintage lamp with a leaning shade. But now it felt different, like it belonged to me somehow. On the coffee table sat a small wooden box. He opened it slowly, as if it were sacred. Inside were letters, stacked carefully, all in the same handwriting, some addressed to me, some never sent. "Your mother wrote these during her pregnancy," he said, "and a few after you were born. She used to say she could feel your heartbeat before you even kicked. She talked to you every day. She loved you so fiercely, Alina." He handed me a photograph. It was a hospital room. A young woman with deep brown eyes and long, dark hair was cradling a newborn. Her face was soft, glowing, joyful. "That's Camilla," he said. The room blurred around me. I had never seen her before, but I knew her. I looked at her the way a child looks into a mirror for the first time and finally sees their own face clearly. I saw myself in her nose, her cheekbones, the way she cradled me, like I was everything. That picture did something no DNA test or family dinner ever could. It made me feel real. My voice trembled. "Why didn't they tell me?" Walter sat down beside me. They didn't want to love something that reminded them of what they took. Marlene always lived in Camilla's shadow. When Camilla died, she saw her chance to rewrite the story. And Gerald, he just followed whatever made life easier. But I knew I couldn't let Camilla's daughter vanish. So I stayed close as they'd let me, and I waited for the day you'd come to me. He pulled out a faded envelope marked for Alina, "When she's ready." It was my mother's handwriting. I opened it slowly, hands shaking, heart wide open. "My dearest Alina, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay long enough to raise you, and I'm so sorry for that, but I need you to know something no one else can ever take away. You were wanted. You were chosen. You were loved. If they tried to make you feel small, it's because they were afraid of how big your heart could be. Don't let them dim your light. You are mine, and I am yours, always." Mom tears spilled freely. Not out of grief, but out of recognition. For the first time in my life, I wasn't questioning if I mattered. I knew I did, and I knew who I was. I wasn't the leftover daughter. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't the girl who had to earn her place at the table. I was Camilla Cardenas's daughter, loved, fought for, chosen. I looked at Grandpa Walter and smiled through tears. "I want to know everything." He smiled back. "Then let's begin." I stayed at Grandpa Walter's that night. We talked until nearly 3 a.m. He showed me more letters, more photos, pieces of a life I'd been living on the edge of without ever knowing it. I learned that my mother, Camilla, had been a music teacher. She used to sing to me every night while I was still in her belly. She called me Lena Bug in her journal entries. She'd planned to raise me on her own. She was scared but proud, brave. Every sentence I read felt like oxygen after years of breathing through a straw. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going back to that house, not to Marlene's sideways smiles or Gerald's polite detachment, not to Tessa's mocking tone, not to that dining room table where love was served with conditions. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was done waiting for them to change, done trying to fit into a space that was never built for me. Instead, I chose myself. A few days later, I filed a petition to legally change my name, Alina Cardenas. The first time I said it aloud at the courthouse, I felt something settle inside me, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. My real name, my mother's name, my truth. I moved into Walter's guest room temporarily. The walls are covered with photos of Camilla and her students, her violin hanging by the door. I've picked up a few of her songs, soft lullabies I play on a keyboard I bought for the house. Music feels like a language we've been speaking across time. And in the middle of it all, I kept working. Nursing doesn't stop even when your world shatters and rebuilds itself. But I work differently now. I smile more. I listen closer. I've started mentoring new students. I carry a picture of Camila in my badge holder, not because I need others to see it, but because I finally want to see her with me. I don't talk to Marlene or Gerald anymore. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Tessa sent a few messages. One said, "I didn't know it would hurt you like that." I never responded. Letting them back in would be like handing them a hammer after I've spent months gluing myself back together, and I'm done being broken for the comfort of others. What I've learned is this: family isn't something you're born into, it's something you build. It's who shows up when everything else falls apart. It's who tells the truth when it's hard. It's who leaves the light on and waits for you to come home, even when everyone else has forgotten you exist. I thought I was nobody for so long, but I was somebody's miracle. I was loved by a mother who never got to watch me grow, but gave me everything she had while she could. I was protected by a grandfather who waited decades to hand me back my own story, and I finally learned how to love myself with that same fierce, unconditional energy. So here's what I'd tell anyone who's ever felt like the outsider in their own family. You are not the problem. You are not less because they failed to see your worth. You are not defined by the ones who couldn't love you right. You are allowed to walk away. And when you do, when you finally choose truth over performance and love over legacy, you don't lose a family. You find your own. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, tell me in the comments, what truth set you free?